Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, hanaina ora for a new episode in the Eilus video tutorial series. My name is Bins, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm excited to do this video. With a little bit of luck, today I'll manage to get you to reach that epiphanic aha moment amidst the sea of what has otherwise been possibly confusing and seemingly unrelated content. It will be theoretic grammar though, so I hope you've brought a tranquil and clear mind. So, in video 30, I talked to you about root word classes. Replete lexemes, qualifiable and unrealized lexemes, structuralizers, function markers, partition and free markers. Then in video 31, we made a tier-to-tier analysis of Eilus's morphosyntactic structure about root words, partitions, the definition of a word, syntactic constituents, and the definition of a sentence. Lastly, this is a throwback video to 20 lessons ago. In video 15, I introduced you to the term step-ladder principle as a metaphor to describe the hierarchy of Eilus root words and sentences. I must insist that if you haven't seen those 3 videos, you do that first, cause today's topic will be the glue that binds these 3 videos together. Brace yourselves, grammar is coming. Now I have a little confession to make. When I went and looked back at these 3 videos to see how to best incorporate them into this one, I noticed that I made and uploaded video number 15 over 4 years ago. Now, the grammatical framework for this stepladder principle has been refined since then, meaning that the entire system of root word classes of video 30 and the morphosyntactic layered structure of video 31 have been developed and defined after I made video 15. This doesn't really mean that back then I said things that are now outdated or no longer true, but the way I phrased everything in hindsight is a bit simplistic. The groundwork for this stepladder principle to function in wasn't very refined, like the difference between a sketch or a draft compared to the final thing. Since then, I've grown. Eilus has grown. It has matured. So we can now reinterpret what was said in video number 15 about the stepladder principle within the grammatical framework laid out in videos 30 and 31. These 3 topics aren't separate topics. On the contrary, they form a unit, a framework. These 3 concepts chime in unison, flowing and revolving around what could be called the fundamental grammar on which the entire Eilus language rests. My aim for this video is therefore to help bring you a step closer to that very level of transparency, to the heart, really, of the Eilus morphology and essentially the entire Eilus way of thinking. Are you ready? Alright. Let's quickly recap video 30. Eilus has 6 root word classes. Each root word belongs to one and exactly one class. 3 of these classes contain lexemes, words that you can use to express thought and refer to things in the real world. The 3 remaining classes contain grammatical root words, or markers, used to provide and regulate the morphological and/or syntactical support of the language. Class 1 root words are called replete lexemes and are the most ordinary type of root words. Class 2 is the class of the qualifiable lexemes. These root words have a meaning like a continuum and can receive qualifier suffixes, unlike Class 1. Class 3 root words are also called liska. They are written with distinct symbols and need to attach to another lexeme in order to become meaningful. Class 4 root words are called function markers. They assign a syntactical role or grammatical case to a word. Class 5 root words are partition markers. They split a word into partitions and assign a relationship between said partitions. The free markers, finally, are a residual group for the root words that don't fit elsewhere. A common trait of the free markers is that they can be functional on either the word or the sentence level, depending on how or where they are used. This is in contrast to Class 4 markers, which only operate on the sentence level, and Class 5 markers, which only operate on the word level. In video 31, we discussed the different levels of morphosyntax that Eilus distinguishes. Let's refresh our memories with an illustrative example. La ni ak aira as em eliana ira en, ha ne, yavak em ak ira an ta em daidai aira. This sentence means, what is the beautiful girl doing to the big grey dog? But the meaning is beside the point. We'll focus on the structure. In terms of syntax, this example is one single sentence. Sentences are split from one another by the separator marker ta. This sentence consists of 3 constituents. Constituents can be recognized because apart from the exceptions discussed in the video about one-word sentences, the first root word of every constituent has to be a function marker. We have 3 function markers, therefore 3 constituents in our sentence. Each constituent consists of 1 function marker and 1 word. This is the next level. If we have 3 constituents, then we have 3 function markers as well as 3 words. The amount of function markers, words, and constituents is the same in every sentence. This has to be so per definition. The amount of words and function markers must equal the amount of constituents per definition. Connecting with the root word classes, saying function markers is the same as saying class 4 root words. So every constituent must start with a class 4 root word. Next, each ILIS word is made up of partitions, optionally with partition markers. There are 4 partition markers in our example, which means that the remaining words each form a partition together, in this case 6 partitions. The partition markers are the root words in class 5. We also have one class 6 marker, the separator, but in this context it also functions as a partition marker. Partitions are exclusively made up of lexemes, which means that all the remaining root words in our example are either class 1, 2, or 3. In the middle, we find the root word ne, which is technically also a partition marker. However, in this case, there are no surrounding root words that the partition marking functionality could apply to. So the root word ne behaves like a class 1 root word here. It is used for its semantic value and means which. So that associates our morphosyntactic tiers to the root word classes. Now, how does all of this blend in with the concept of hierarchy? How is the stepladder principle interwoven? Well, let's get back those cute little cubes I made for video 15.
Hello.
The stepladder principle postulates that every consecutive root word can be seen as a descriptor of the preceding one, kind of like noun and adjective or verb and adverb. This is true for any adjacent pair of root words, and so the feature stacks. Every root word in the middle between 2 other root words acts both as a noun to the succeeding root word and as an adjective to the preceding one. But this is only part of the truth. It is the most essential part of the bigger picture, but it is not the full picture. Because this linear stepladder hierarchy only applies to replete lexemes, class 1 root words. Each of the root word classes has a unique relation to the stepladder, a unique behavior in the hierarchy of words and sentences. So only if all root words in a string belong to class 1 does the stepladder look like this. Class 1 might be the biggest class of root words by far, however, it is only one of 6 root word classes in total. So let's have a look at the other classes. Class 2 is very similar, however, it has a different number of what I like to describe as slots. Class 1 root words have a standard of 2 slots, 1 on each side. They depend on 1 root word on the left and are dominant over 1 root word to the right. Class 2 root words have 3 slots, 1 on the left, 2 on the right. Have a look at the word akiraan, which means big in size. Ak is a class 2 root word and an is a class 1 root word. Between them is a qualifier. Qualifiers can only connect to class 2 root words and are hierarchically unique in that they don't govern. This means that there are 2 blocks that can attach to a class 2 root word like ak. A qualifier, and then another class 1 or class 2 root word. The stepladder would therefore look a bit like this. The qualifier is optional. If a class 2 root word isn't immediately followed by a qualifier, then the behavior of class 2 root words is identical to class 1, like in the word akan, which means either distance or size. So within a bigger string of root words, the qualifier slot is optional and has no influence on the rest of the hierarchy within the ladder. Alright? Next up, class 3, better known as the liska. We have a liska in our example. The qualifier ira consists of the liska I, which is 3, and ra, which in itself is also a class 1 root word. The liska are unique because they are dependent on the next root word rather than the previous. So the stepladder would look a bit more accurate like this. The liska themselves have a governing slot for the first root word to follow the root word they themselves are attached to, the letter of which in turn connects to the root word preceding the liska. Now I think I might be overcomplicating it when I explain it like this. Let's make life easier on ourselves and look at it like this. The liska fuse with the following root word, and as a cluster, this block takes its place in the stepladder in regular fashion. This doesn't only happen when the liska is part of a qualifier, but always. Other examples: Ig Eilis, which means the eyeless language, or Vak Atai, which means the grey dog. The next class is class 4. This one is really easy. The function markers indicate the start of a new constituent, right? Well, each constituent is an independent stepladder. This means that each class 4 function marker, per definition, starts a new stepladder that's unrelated with the others. As we know, each constituent and therefore each stepladder in terms of the sentence level must start with either ha for topic, ia for patient, la for agent, or ir for modifier. Class 5 then is a bit quirkier. Imagine a string of root words that form one word together. We are on the word level. This word has 2 partition markers in the middle and therefore 3 partitions. What a partition marker does for the hierarchy is this. It has a theoretical infinite number of slots and will connect to all root words it finds until it bumps into either the start of the word, the end of a word, or another partition marker. It then treats all these root words as one group each and connects those groups to one another like noun and adjective, or verb and adverb. Any partition marker in the word does this the same way. You could therefore say that the partition markers take the stepladder principle and apply it on a higher level. They take entire strings of root words and hierarchically turn them into one block each. These blocks are called partitions. The partitions, in turn, behave regularly within the stepladder like they were ordinary, run-of-the-mill class 1 root words with one slot on each side. Now, that's not always what we want, and that brings us to class 6. We'll need to look at the elements in this class separately because each of them has a unique behavior. Let's start with the separator ta. If the next root word is a class 4 root word, then the separator creates a new sentence at that point. I don't think that requires any further explanation. If the next word is anything other than a function marker or class 4 root word, then the separator will behave the same way as a partition marker, but with a kind of reset function. Let's look at this example word, which has 2 partition markers and 3 partitions. It has 2 characteristic markers m. But not only that, the latter characteristic marker has a separator before it. The effect this has is that the last partition's hierarchy is elevated. This partition no longer refers to the previous partition, but to the same one as the previous partition marker. In other words, in our example, it also refers to the first partition. This is how we can connect 2 adjectives to one and the same partition, which in this case is gai e ira en, a visual lesson. This lesson is on the eyeless language, but it is also number 35 in its category. If the separator marker weren't there, then the number 35 would refer to the eyeless language, which means our word would translate to video lesson on the 35th eyeless language. That's not what we want, so that is what the separator can do for you in terms of hierarchy on the word level. Last but not least, we have the sentence bracket. The sentence bracket is used to create subclauses. So if we have a stepladder string and there is a sentence bracket inside it, then everything within the bracket will hierarchically also behave as one and become a unified, regular element within the stepladder. What sets the sentence bracket apart from anything else is its ability to harbor class 4 root words, which gives way to all kinds of new stepladder shenanigans. Within the bracket, all root words behave the way I've described them. Word order is also free. But from a point of view of the main clause, everything within the bracket is just one single hierarchical unit that behaves like yet another ordinary, run-of-the-mill class 1 root word with one slot on each side. And that's how it works. Now, I do realize that this video is getting quite long already. Still, I'd like to encourage you to stick around for a bit longer. Because theory is nice and all, but it seems like a smart idea to me if we saw how the root word classes, the morphosyntactic levels, and the stepladder principle co-act in practice. We'll use the phrase with the girl and the dog from before. Lani ak airaas eliana ira en hane, yavak ak ira an ta taidai aira. First, we'll single out the class 4 root words, the function markers. This tells us how many constituents there are on the sentence level, and thus how many different stepladders we can discern. Then, we'll try to find the root words of class 6. There is no sentence bracket, but there is a separator. Together with the class 5 root words, we then know that on the partition level, our stepladders look like this. We also know that the remaining root words bring the semantics to the table, so we'll look at the content of the individual partitions. The first partition consists of 5 root words: ni, ak, ai, ra, and as. Ni is of class 1, ak is of class 2. The liska of class 3 bind to the next root, which in this case is another class 1 root word. Together, they form a qualifier. As, finally, is another replete lexeme of class 1. Due to the presence of the qualifier, we know that the root word ak has 2 dependency slots on the right. Our dependency structure, therefore, looks like this, and, in turn, our stepladder looks like this. Then, we'll have a look at what the root words mean. Length and time together mean duration, and the length is short. A short duration is the same as saying quickly, but also new or young. And a young woman, in turn, is a girl. So, ni ak aira as, a girl. The second partition consists of 6 root words, which belong to classes 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, and 2. There is another qualifier in here, and therefore we get dependency structure, stepladder. And here are the semantics. If we put quality, a lot, and sight together, we get visually good. This is connected to the abstractness, and a visually good abstract feeling, in turn, is a good visual emotion. In other words, visual pleasure, or simply beauty. Within the constituent, the beauty is a descriptor of the girl. And so, ni ak airaas eliana ira en is a beautiful girl, right? Then, let's look at the second constituent. We'll leave the function marker ha within our scope because that's what the question marker ne refers to. Ha ne, which topic? And then in the third and last constituent, there are 3 partitions, the first of which is vak, a dog. In the second partition, we have another 4 root words, more specifically of classes 2, 3, 1, 1. With the observation that we have another qualifier in the middle, we know that the stepladder looks like this. A lot of spatial length means big. Finally, in the last partition, we find root word classes 1 and 2, followed by another qualifier. Dai means color, and this color is not very bright. We don't specify which hue this color has, and we can therefore conclude that it's probably not relevant. It's a dark, unspecified color, which we can understand as dark gray. On the partition level, we have 2 adjectives linked to the dog. The dog is big, and the dog is gray. Now let's shift up a level and look at the constituents. There are 3 of them. The topic is the thing inquired about, so which topic simply means what. What is going on? The girl is the agent of the sentence. She is the sender. So, what we want to know is what she does. And the dog, finally, is the patient. We want to know what's happening to the dog. So our 3 constituents mean, in proper English, what is the beautiful girl doing to the big gray dog? Now, over time, seeing through this web of hierarchic dependency and consequently being able to interpret the meaning of the partitions, words, constituents, and sentences correctly will become a second nature, All it takes is some getting used to the principle, and then, if you know what each root word means, you'll see that you can understand words and sentences immediately while you hear a spoken utterance or read from left to right. La, ni, ac, aera, as. El, ea, na, ira, en. Ha, ne, ia, vac. Ac, ira, an. Ta, dai, aera. By a woman with a length that's temporally short and with a feeling that's abstract and good visually, there is what, corresponding to dog with length that's long and spatial, and with a color whose brightness is low. This is how ILIS works. This is how all is strung together. There are 6 root word classes, each with their own distinctive nature. These root word classes operate on different morphosyntactic levels, and all of this is neatly woven into a well-defined and well-organized network of dependency structures and hierarchic levels called the step-ladder principle. So I hope this video has helped to bring you a step closer to understanding the fundamental structure of this language, and if so, that it has sparked your interest to learn more. Stay tuned for upcoming videos. I'd like to thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again next time. Na ora!